There are moments in life when the universe holds its breath, when every assumption we make about who matters and who doesn't comes crashing down like glass. This is one of those moments. A story about a woman whose silence was mistaken for simplicity, whose grace was confused with servitude, and whose truth would shatter every prejudice in that room. Her name was Maya Johnson. She was 32 years old, and she had been waiting tables at the Pearl, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, for 3 months. Every night, she moved through that dining room like a shadow, her black uniform crisp, her movements efficient, her face carefully neutral. She carried trays of $100 steaks and $1,000 wines to people who never looked at her face. To them, she was part of the scenery. Invisible, forgettable, nothing. But Maya was not nothing. She had learned long ago to make herself small, to tuck away the parts of herself that might invite questions. In a world that judged her before she even opened her mouth, silence had become her armor. She had learned to swallow the casual cruelty, the wandering eyes that never quite met hers, the way conversations stopped when she approached a table as if her presence might contaminate their evening. She had learned to smile through it all, to say thank you when there was nothing to be thankful for, to accept tips that felt more like pity than appreciation. But on this particular Tuesday evening in October, everything was about to change. The restaurant was at capacity, every table occupied by Manhattan's elite. Investment bankers celebrating mergers, tech entrepreneurs courting venture capital die, old money dining with new money, each trying to prove they belonged in this temple of privilege. The air was thick with expensive cologne and even more expensive egos. And at table 12, commanding the room like a king holding court, sat Marcus Chen. Marcus Chen was a self-made millionaire, the kind of full success story that magazines love to feature. From nothing to everything, from poverty to penthouse. He had built a technology empire from a garage, or so the story went, and now at 45, he wore his wealth like a weapon. His suit was Italian, his watch Swiss, his confidence absolute. He was loud, expansive, taking up space not just physically but energetically, his laughter carrying across the dining room, his voice drowning out the careful murmur of cultivated conversation. He was dining with clients from Beijing, important men whose investment could take his company to the next level. Everything had to be perfect. The food, the wine, the atmosphere, the impression. He had hired a translator for the evening, a young man named David, who sat nervously at the edge of the table, translating the Mandarin conversation with increasing difficulty as the dialect shifted and the business terminology grew more complex. Maya had been assigned to their table. She approached with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned not to linger, not to make eye contact for too long, not to give anyone a reason to remember her. She placed water glasses, refilled wine, cleared plates. She was professional, polite, and perfectly forgettable. Until Marcus Chen decided she should be entertainment. It started small, as cruelty often does. A comment to his guests as she walked away, just loud enough for her to hear. Something about the help. Something about how you can't expect much from people like that. The laughter that followed felt like needles against her skin. She kept walking. She had learned to keep walking. But Marcus was the kind of man who needed an audience, who fed on attention like oxygen. And as the evening wore on, as the wine flowed and his confidence grew into arrogance, he turned his attention fully toward Maya. When she returned to take their dessert order, he leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at his lips that wasn't quite a smile. It was something sharper, something meaner. He said something in Mandarin to his guests. They laughed, uncomfortable but complicit. David, the translator, looked down at his plate. Maya stood there, her pen poised over her notepad, waiting. Then Marcus switched to English, his words slow and exaggerated, as if speaking to a child, or someone he considered too simple to understand normal speech. He asked if she had gone to school, if she could read the menu, if she knew what any of these dishes were. His tone was joking, but the mockery underneath was razor sharp. His guests shifted in their seats. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, looked genuinely uncomfortable. But no one said anything. No one stopped him. Maya's hand tightened on her pen. Her face remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Something that Marcus, drunk on his own importance, completely missed. That's when he made the offer. He pulled out his wallet, making a show of it, panning through $100 bills like playing cards. His voice grew louder, ensuring nearby tables could hear. He said he would give her $100,000 right there, right then, if she could serve him in Chinese. Just Chinese, not English. Could she do that? Could someone like her manage even that simple task? The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were watching now, some horrified, some curious, all of them waiting to see what would happen. The manager was moving toward the table, alarm written across his face. But Maya, still standing there with her notepad, raised one hand slightly, a gesture that said, "Wait." She looked at Marcus Chen for the first time that evening. Really looked at him. And something in her gaze made his smile falter just for a second. There was something there he hadn't expected. Something that didn't match the story he had told himself about who she was. She spoke. And when she did, it wasn't in English. Her Mandarin was flawless. Not the textbook Mandarin of language apps and evening classes, but the fluid, nuanced Mandarin of someone who had lived inside the language. She asked if he preferred Cantonese instead, switching dialects mid-sentence with such ease that one of his guests actually gasped. She continued in Shanghainese, asking about his business proposition, her tone professional, almost amused. Then she switched to Japanese, asking one of the other guests if he preferred steak with his dessert. She moved into Korean, into French, into Spanish, each transition seamless, each language spoken with native fluency. She listed the evening's dessert options in Arabic, explained the wine pairing in Portuguese, confirmed the check details in German, and finished with a question in Italian about whether they needed anything else. 9 languages. 9 perfect, flawless, native-level languages, spoken in under 3 minutes, without a single pause, without a single stumble. She spoke them the way other people breathe, naturally and without thought. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus Chen's face had gone pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The $100 bills were still in his hand, suddenly looking cheap and insignificant. His guests were staring at Maya with expressions ranging from shock to profound respect. One of them, the older gentleman, actually stood up and bowed to her, speaking in rapid Mandarin that even David the translator struggled to follow. She answered him with a slight smile, something warm and genuine that had never appeared during her entire shift. David, the professional translator Marcus had hired for thousands of dollars, was looking at Maya like she was a ghost or a miracle. He recognized what the others might have missed: the complexity of what she had just done, the cognitive flexibility required to move between 9 different linguistic systems, 9 different grammatical structures, 9 different cultural contexts, without preparation, without notes, without a single error. This wasn't someone who had studied languages. This was someone for whom languages were as natural as breathing. The manager had reached the table, ready to intervene, but Maya spoke to him quietly, in English, assuring him everything was fine. She turned back to Marcus, and when she spoke again, it was in English, but her tone had changed. The careful neutrality was gone. In its place was something quiet but unshakable. She didn't want his $100,000. She didn't need it. What she needed, what everyone in that room needed, was a reminder that assumptions are dangerous things. That the person you dismiss might be carrying more knowledge, more experience, more depth than you could imagine in your wildest dreams. That service work doesn't equal simple. That silence doesn't mean empty. Then she said something that would haunt Marcus Chen for the rest of his life. She told him in Mandarin so his guests could understand about her background. She had been a linguistics professor at one of China's most prestigious universities. She had a doctorate from Oxford. She had published research that had changed the field of language acquisition. She had consulted for the United Nations, translating sensitive diplomatic negotiations between countries on the brink of war. She had taught at Harvard, at Cambridge, at the Sorbonne. And 3 years ago, she had lost everything. Her voice didn't break when she told the guy story, but something in the way she held herself changed, became smaller. She explained how her husband had been killed in a car accident, how the grief had broken something in her that she couldn't fix, how she had walked away from her career, from her life, from everything that reminded her of who she used to be. How she had come to New York to disappear, to become anonymous, to serve food and fade into the background, because being invisible felt safer than being seen. She had chosen this job, not because she couldn't do anything else. She had chosen it because it was the only thing that didn't hurt. Because when you're serving tables, people don't ask questions about your past. They don't care who you were. They don't see you at all. Until tonight. Until this moment. Until Marcus Chen's cruelty had forced her back into visibility. The restaurant was completely silent now. Other diners had stopped eating. Wait staff had frozen in place. Even the kitchen seemed to have gone quiet, as if the entire building was holding its breath. One of Marcus's guests, the older gentleman, spoke. His Mandarin was formal, apologetic. He asked for her forgiveness on behalf of his colleague. He said that sometimes success makes men forget humility. That sometimes power makes people cruel. That they had all been guilty tonight of seeing the uniform instead of the person. Marcus Chen still hadn't spoken. He looked like a man watching his entire worldview collapse in real time. The money in his hand suddenly felt obscene. His jokes, his mockery, his casual cruelty, all of it was replaying in his mind, and for the first time, he was seeing it from the other side. He was seeing himself the way Maya had seen him, and it was ugly. She didn't wait for his apology. She simply picked up her notepad, asked one more time if they needed anything else, and when they shook their heads, she walked away. Her steps were steady, her head high. She disappeared into the kitchen, and for a long moment, no one moved. Then something extraordinary happened. The older Chinese gentleman stood up. He pulled out his business card and asked the manager to give it to Maya. On the back, he wrote something in Mandarin. Then he left an envelope on the table. Inside was not a tip but a check for $200,000 and a job offer. His company needed someone exactly like her. Someone brilliant who had chosen humility over ego. Someone who understood languages, not as tools, but as bridges between human souls. 3 other diners approached the manager that night with similar offers. Job opportunities, research positions, consulting work. The story of the waitress who spoke 9 languages spread through the restaurant like wildfire. Then beyond it, into the networks of power and privilege that those diners inhabited. By morning, it was a viral story. By the end of the week, Maya had received 47 job offers from universities, corporations, international organizations, and private individuals who wanted to work with someone who had that rare combination of brilliance and humility. Marcus Chen paid his bill in silence and left. But the story followed him. His business associates heard about it. His colleagues. His investors. The men from Beijing cancelled their deal, citing concerns about his character and judgment. In trying to humiliate someone he considered beneath him, he had revealed everything about himself. And the revelation was damning. 3 months later, Maya was working for the United Nations again. But this time, she wasn't hiding. She had learned something that night, at the Pearl. That healing doesn't come from disappearing. It comes from being seen, truly seen, and choosing to stand in that visibility anyway. Her grief hadn't disappeared. The loss of her husband still ached like a phantom limb, but she had found a way to carry it without letting it consume her. She had found purpose again. She never saw Marcus Chen after that night, but she heard about him. How he had stepped down from his company. How he had started volunteering at immigrant resource centers, teaching business skills to refugees and asylum seekers. How he had funded scholarship programs for service workers who wanted to continue their education. It wasn't redemption, exactly. You don't erase cruelty with charity. But it was change. It was acknowledgement. It was a man looking at the ugliness he had revealed in himself and choosing to do better. The Pearl restaurant still operates in Manhattan, but they tell a different story now. Not about the rich and powerful who dine there, but about the woman who reminded everyone that dignity isn't determined by job title or bank account. That every person serving your food, cleaning your hotel room, driving your taxi, or standing behind a checkout counter might be carrying a universe of experience and knowledge that you couldn't begin to comprehend. That kindness isn't something you offer down to people beneath you. It's something you offer across to people beside you. Because that's where everyone actually is. Beside you. Equal. Human. Worthy. Maya's story became something larger than one evening, one restaurant, one moment of cruelty. Revealed and answered. It became a reminder that we live in a world where people make assumptions every single day based on appearance, accent, occupation, or skin color. Where intelligence is judged by job title. Where worth is measured in salary. Where visibility is reserved for those the world has already decided matter. But here's the truth that Maya's story reveals. Every person you encounter is carrying a story you cannot see. The waitress might be a professor. The janitor might be a poet. The delivery driver might be an engineer whose degree isn't recognized in this country. The woman at the checkout counter might speak 5 languages and have a doctorate in physics. The man cleaning your office might have been a surgeon in his home country before war forced him to flee with nothing but his life. You cannot know by looking. You cannot know by assuming. You can only know by treating every single person with the dignity and respect they deserve simply because they exist. Not because of what they do. Not because of what they've accomplished. But because they are human, and humanity is the only credential that actually matters. There's a line that keeps echoing long after Maya's story ends. Something she said to our journalist who asked how she had maintained her composure that night. How she hadn't shouted, hadn't cried, hadn't thrown Marcus Chen's cruelty back in his face. She said something that cuts straight to the heart of what strength actually means. She said that anger is easy. Humiliation is easy to return. But grace, real grace, is choosing to respond to cruelty, not with more cruelty, but with truth, with dignity, with the quiet certainty that your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. That you don't need to prove yourself to people who have already decided you're not worth knowing. You just need to keep being who you are. And eventually, if they're lucky, They might catch a glimpse of what they almost missed. That's the lesson of Maya's story. Not that she embarrassed a rich man. Not that she proved she was smarter than him. But that she never let his judgment define her. She knew who she was. She knew what she carried. And she didn't need his validation or his $100,000 to confirm it. She had something more valuable than money or recognition. She had self-knowledge. She had dignity. She had the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself because it's woven into every cell, every breath, every choice. The world is full of people like Marcus Chen. People who judge quickly and harshly. People who use their power to diminish others. People who have decided that certain jobs, certain backgrounds, certain accents or skin, colors mean certain things about intelligence or worth. These people exist everywhere, in every country, every community, every level of society. And they cause real harm. Their assumptions create barriers. Their prejudices close doors. Their cruelty leaves scars. But the world is also full of people like Maya. People who carry brilliance quietly. People who have chosen or been forced into work that doesn't reflect their full capacity. People who serve your coffee, drive your bus, clean your office, and carry within them stories of courage and loss and survival and knowledge that would humble you if you knew. People who are not waiting for your permission to be valuable. They already are valuable. They always have been. If this story touched something in you, if it made you pause and reconsider the assumptions you make about the people you encounter every day, then it has done what stories are meant to do. It has reminded you that every face you pass, every person you interact with, every individual providing you a service or sharing your space, is carrying an entire universe inside them. A universe you know nothing about. A universe that might surprise you, humble you, teach you something you desperately need to learn. So, here's what Maya's story asks of you. Look again. Look at the person serving your food, ringing up your groceries, delivering your packages. Look at them not as functions, not as services, but as people. As individuals with histories and hopes, heartbreaks and hidden depths. Treat them not with the bare minimum of politeness you think their job requires, but with the respect and dignity you would want if your positions were reversed. Because they might be. Because life is unpredictable and cruel and beautiful and strange. Because the professor becomes a waitress. Because the refugee was a doctor. Because the janitor is a poet. Because you cannot know, you can never know, unless you choose to see people as people first before anything else. This is not about guilt. It's not about making you feel bad for every assumption you've ever made. We all make assumptions. It's how our brains work, creating shortcuts to navigate a complex world. But Maya's story is an invitation to pause before those assumptions harden into judgments, to question the shortcuts, to remember that every human being is more than what they appear to be, in a single moment, in a single uniform. The restaurant where this happened, the Pearl, has Maya's story framed in their staff room now. Every new employee reads it during training, not as a warning about difficult customers, though there's that too, but as a reminder of why service work matters, why treating people with dignity matters, why every interaction, no matter how brief or transactional it seems, is an opportunity to either honor someone's humanity or diminish it. And that choice, that daily, moment-by-moment choice, is what defines us more than our job, titles or bank accounts or achievements ever could. Marcus Chen's life changed that night, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. He didn't become a villain or a cautionary tale, though he could have been both. He became something more complicated. A man who saw himself clearly for the first time and didn't like what he saw. A man who chose to spend the rest of his life trying to do better. Not to erase what he had done, because you can't erase cruelty once it's spoken, but to balance it, to create more good than harm, to use his privilege and power to lift up the people he once looked down on. That's not redemption in the fairy tale sense. There's no neat bow, no perfect ending where everything is forgiven and forgotten. Some things stay with you. Some lessons cost too much to ever feel like a fair trade. But it is change. Real, difficult, ongoing change. The kind that requires you to confront your own ugliness every single day and choose differently anyway. And Maya, she's still speaking 9 languages, still teaching, still translating, still building bridges between people who speak different words but share the same human experience. But now, she does it with full visibility. She doesn't hide anymore. She doesn't make herself small. She takes up space, not aggressively or arrogantly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows her worth and doesn't need anyone else's permission to claim it. She still thinks about that night sometimes. About the moment when Marcus Chen waved his money in her face and offered her $100,000 to perform her humanity like a trick. She thinks about the humiliation of it, the casual cruelty, the way everyone in that room was complicit in their silence, until she forced them to see. But mostly, she thinks about the choice she made, to respond with truth instead of anger, to reveal herself not as revenge, but as reclamation. To remind everyone, including herself, that she was never invisible. She was always there. They just weren't looking. That's the power of Maya's story. It doesn't give us easy answers or comfortable resolutions. It doesn't let us off the hook by making Marcus Chen a monster so different from us that we can dismiss him as an aberration. He's not. He's human. He's flawed. He's capable of cruelty, and also capable of change. Just like all of us. Just like you. The question Maya's story leaves us with isn't about what we would have done in that moment. It's about what we're doing in every moment. How we treat the people we encounter. How we judge or don't judge. How we see or don't see. How we honor or dismiss the humanity of everyone around us, especially those we've been taught to consider less important than ourselves. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We all have a little bit of Marcus Chen in us. We all make assumptions. We all carry prejudices, conscious or unconscious, that shape how we interact with the world. We all have moments where we fail to see someone's full humanity because it's easier, faster, more comfortable to put them in a box and move on. That doesn't make us irredeemable. It makes us human. But it also makes us responsible for doing better. If this story reached you, if it made you feel something, anger or shame or sadness or hope, then carry that feeling forward. Let it change how you move through the world. Let it make you pause the next time you're about to make an assumption about someone based on their job or appearance or accent. Let it remind you that every person deserves to be seen, not for what they do, but for who they are. Let it teach you that grace is more powerful than cruelty, that truth is more lasting than judgment, that humanity is the only thing that actually binds us together across all our differences. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who works in service and carries their own hidden depths. Someone who has power and needs reminding to wield it gently. Someone who has judged or been judged and needs to know that neither of those things is the end of the story. We all contain multitudes. We all deserve to be seen. Subscribe to hear more stories like this. Stories about the hidden brilliance of the ordinary people. Stories about the cost of judgment and the power of grace. Stories about what happens when the world finally looks at someone it had dismissed and realizes what it almost missed. Stories about humanity in all its messy, complicated, beautiful truth. Because every story hides a truth. and every truth deserves to be heard.